Hello, everybody, and welcome to Curseborne number three. Did we give these things titles? Just this is number three.
This
This
is
is the
would be
last
the
one.
future of Curseborne.
The future of
Yeah.
Curseborne. The days of
Besides
future
the main book,
past.
what else?
Yeah, cool. So we're here today to talk to you about what we have planned for Curseborne, at least at this moment. We're gonna talk a little bit about some of the things we have in motion, some of the things we're getting in motion, some of the things that we're just, have as brain children, that at least have been approved by Rich. I mean, I have so many ideas that Rich is just has not approved for me yet. Yeah. Like I need Southern Gothic, okay? It's gonna happen eventually. All right. So, but before we get started, let's introduce everybody on the panel. We've got a lot of people on this panel today, because Rich and I have brought in a lot of our freelancers who have been working diligently on Curseborne, in various capacities. So I'm gonna start. Well, you all know Rich. I'm gonna let him,
Hello.
introduce himself or say hello.
Uh,
Uh,
I'm Rich Thomas, founder and creative director of Onyx Publishing, and been doing this Curseborne thing for a while, and gonna lend
yep.
a little bit of support in that area to our crew here.
Excellent. All right. So let's move on. Since we all kind of know who Rich is, what his job is. Let's talk to Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Roy. I am a freelance writer and developer, and I've done a whole bunch of things all across Onyx Path games. And I am developing an exciting thing for Curseborne.
Ooh, an exciting thing. I love how vague that was. So good.
I figure we'll wait until we get to that point. We'll keep
Sure.
everybody on the hook.
All
Mhm.
right. Kim.
Hi, my name's Kim Godwin. I'm a freelancer and developer for Onyx Path. I haven't developed anything yet for Curseborne, but I have worked on a few things for Curseborne. So I look forward to getting to share about it.
Excellent. And Chris.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I'm Chris Jones, again, one of the freelancers for Onyx Path. I've worked on quite a few of the lines, but at the moment, big focus is on lots of Curseborne stuff. So all very exciting.
Yeah. All right, great. So everybody just, was extremely vague about what they're doing on Curseborne. So let's, I guess, talk a little bit about what we have upcoming that is literally in the works right now. So, yesterday we had a panel about Toil and Trouble, which is the player's guide,
Mhm.
and we talked a little bit about the companion book, I think. Um, but we haven't, or did we talk about that? I don't remember what we talked about.
We did a sort of an overview of we're doing the companion book, but I don't think we went into much in the way of detail. If anybody here is working on that, would like to talk about what they got going on.
Cool. So is anybody here working on the companion? I don't know if
I
that's
think so.
who is working.
I'm on Toil and Trouble.
You're on Toil and Trouble. Kim, what are you? Oh man, there's so many things in the works right now, guys. I am not working on the companion, but I know what's in the
I am
companion.
not.
And the companion is what we pitched on the Kickstarter, the crowdfunder, and when uh we got that started, and it's essentially like a couple of locations and a breakout of like creatures or people in those locations, stories that you could tell in those locations, and then the troubles and just the things that are going on in those places. This was what we promised as a stretch goal on the crowdfunding campaign back in October. So that thing's in the works and moving forward. We also have an adventure book that is just now getting started up. Chris, are
That's what I'm
you?
on.
I was gonna say, Chris, you're on that,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So
yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about how that's structured and what we're doing with that?
Sure. So yeah, it's the Accursed Adventures, and essentially it's a story in three parts. So I've worked on the final side of that, so where it all comes to its end. And they are their own unique stories. So the reality is you can just pick and choose which ones of these you like and what works for your group. But if you wanted to tell a longer, continuous story that has a thread that runs through them, that's what you get in Accursed Adventures. As I said, mine ties things up at the end. And I suppose there's a mystery surrounding it, around some interesting. Well, obviously everything's going to be family business, but I think this family is a little bit more interesting than most.
Cool. Great. What else do we have in production? Lauren, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book that you're developing?
Sure. I am lucky enough to be developing the Curseborne anthology, which is a collection of stories set in the world of Curseborne in the setting. And we have a fantastic cast of writers on there who have just really kind of dug into a lot of the themes behind the families and lineages and the kind of problems that your characters would be dealing with. So it's that very personal, very like, oh, they all keep kicking me in the teeth every time I read one of their stories. They're so good.
Yeah,
And it's just, I am so excited for people to read them.
excellent. Great. And Kim, what are you working on right now? Are you on Toil and Trouble as well?
I'm not. I wrote the Jumpstart and
That's
I
right.
submitted a
Yes.
story and I had a story in the anthology.
Okay. Tell us about the jump start, or don't, give it away or anything, but just kind of tell us
Yeah, there's room
what
to
kind.
talk about.
Yeah, there's room to talk about like what kind of adventure is it? What kind of story? How are we getting people introduced to Curseborne?
So, of course, with every Jumpstart, there's the challenge of trying to condense the basics of what who the accursed are and what they do into one chapter so we can play from one book. So that was a challenge to summarize all of that because going into how the damnation works and what each family and lineage is about, or was kind of like we had to narrow it down to just what family the accursed were. So I had to rewrite the ready-made characters, the signature characters from the ash can into the current version of the rules. So I had like 3 versions of the rules at some point before I got the final one to finish it. And I wanted to, and like I normally do, I like doing um, as my intro adventure, The Wolf You Feed is a investigation into a friend's missing sister. And for it, I wasn't asked to do this. I just did this anyway. So I made this little journal as a prop, and I can show part of it.
I love that.
So I bound it, put the corners on it, and then did some stuff. And I thought this would be a cool as an interactive thing, as a storytelling tool because I like playing with those sorts of things. I did the same sort of thing when I decided to make painful.love as an actual website. It's like, what cool things can you find in here? How can you interact with it? So there's lots of puzzles that people haven't found. They've found what the pages are, but they haven't found what the actual puzzles are and what they mean. So I like doing that sort of thing
Yeah.
where even just looking at the journal one way is like it doesn't make sense until you look at it as a whole. So, and then of course I love doing vintage photos. I did this when I did my actual play at Tabletop Scotland. I had like a rusted farm key that I threw on the table and like a pile of books to do a book cipher. So I
Nice.
love doing that
I
sort of
love
thing,
that.
and I like trying to figure out how you can do that sort of thing with online role playing too. It's
Yeah.
like, well, give them a PDF with the book, or you give them little handouts or like weird sound bites. So if I'm sitting at a table, it's like, I want you to hear this thing, so I'll pull up my phone and play a sound clip from like a open source thing. So just different ways to be a little bit more interactive. And I made the journal as a way to get through some writer's block. So I was like, okay, cool. Let's make something physical and play with it a little bit and get to know the victim, um, who you have to find. So
No, I think
I
that's
just thought
really
that was fun.
smart.
It's really
A lot
good.
of time when you're blocked on one part of a project, going and doing something else,
Yep.
even if it could be related to or not related to it, but it kind of stirs things up in different ways, and eventually that block also starts to go away because you're not so hyper focused on, I gotta write this page now.
Yeah, I love doing I guess the other side of the brain work whenever I have a writer's block. So I'll do an art project like
Hmm.
you did. I do pastels and miniature painting and stuff like that, and it sometimes helps just to, I guess, give the writing part a rest. So like I love things like that too because we could take, the prototype that Kim has made and essentially recreate it and, scan it, things like that, and create something similar as some kind of interactive play tool to go along with the jumpstart. And that, a lot of that work's already been done. Clearly Kim did it, but having little artifacts like that really, I think, make games more tactile, even if it's being played online, and having that makes it more immersive. And I think Curseborne is one of the games that every time I'm reading it, writing it, involved in it, I start like coming up with things that are outside of just the writing. And it's one of the few games that I do that with. I think Curseborne just kind of lives in my head right now, and will always.
Yeah, just a
Burned
little
in.
bit.
Is burned in there. So,
And you also troll online, Curseborne fans when you need a little break.
yeah, yeah, I do that.
We revealed that at one of the panels, the
Yeah.
first panel about everything that led up to Curseborne, including Curse Boy and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
was
I
properly
mean,
aimed at you.
it was absolutely aimed at me. And it's true though, but it did help me kind of
Hmm.
embody like the writing aspect of things while I was also, trolling the fans. Um, it's just a little fun in games.
Hmm.
Cool. Chris, you're working on Toil and Trouble. I'm also working on Toil and Trouble. I know that we talked about it yesterday, but I sat in on that panel and there were a lot of questions that people were asking just in general about Curseborne. And could you tell us a little bit about the stuff that you worked on, how you thought about, because I know what you worked on. So how you, I guess, thought about how do I approach this material to make this player's guide, which is essentially what this is, and make, you know, these things, I guess, help players in a way that makes the families, the lineages, the play style, all of that more interesting and I guess approachable.
Yeah, sure. So keeping it kind of high level and vague, my section was really looking into the nuts and bolts of the families, like how they work, what do they do day to day, who's the leader, who are the followers, what kind of factions and groups might we see in them. So that for me was a really fun project to do because there's so many families, and it's the thought was, okay, well, how can I make these feel a little bit different? If I'm a player, or if I'm working around my core groups, I've got a couple of groups I work with. What kind of things are they going to want to see in there? So it was trying to think of lots of different approaches to how people might tackle a problem or how people might want to enjoy their game, because I've been role playing for 30 odd years now, and sometimes I want a game that is kind of real high on the violence and is just let's throw ourselves into this and see how things go. Sometimes I really want something that's a lot more investigative or social or even political or anything like that. So my thought processes was how can I make these families fit into those different types of play styles? What little hooks can I put in there for a storyteller to go, oh, that'll be kind of, that could work for a story. That could be something I can put into, or even as a character, because I like reading through, whatever book that I've got on, what I've got going through, and finding something that makes me go, I might not use that exact thing, but that makes me think of something slightly different. But yeah, it was a great experience to read through each of the families and think, okay, well, this is what we've been presented so far, very in character focus. How can I take a step back from that and look at them in a slightly more organized and pragmatic way? And again, it's all about how would I want to play, what play styles are going to come there. So that was my bit, and great fun to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've read through your work and it's excellent. It, in the sense of like it gave me ideas of like how I would play these characters and, of course, every time I read anything that anybody else writes about the families, I'm like, "Oh, this is my favorite family now." And then I read the next one and, "Oh, this is my favorite."
I
It's
really
real
felt
hard.
that going through it. I first time I read through Curseborne, I thought, oh, I love the dead families. Those are brilliant. Poltergeist, Mavens, that is
Yeah.
my jam. And then going through this, I was like, actually, I quite like some of these primal families. I could really go for one of the raptors. That's a kind of cool thing. So actually, what this sorcerer, the faceless.
Yeah.
Oh, how about one of those? And you start thinking of all these different characters and
Yeah.
approaches that you take. And another approach that I was involved on for my section was about family gatherings.
Mhm.
So all of the different types of parties and reasons why all of these families get together. It's a great opportunity for them to have fun, but it's not just going to be about that. So what are the good things they're doing? What are the bad things they're doing? Who's going to get invited? Who's going to be a problem
Mhm.
in that party? And what do you even get out of that?
Potential
That
for all
actually
those forms of role playing you were talking about in a
Right,
single
exactly.
party.
Yeah.
exactly, and I came straight off of that onto the Accursed Adventure, and I won't spoil it, but there was definitely some inspiration from writing Toil and Trouble that fed into the adventure
I mean,
because of the
great.
gatherings.
Perfect. Yeah.
I think it's always a good sign when the people who are writing and creating for a game line start thinking, I want to play that character now. Oh, I'm going to come up with a character for that. Call that the Chup test back in the day, named after Sam Chup, who first coined it as it. If you're writing for an NPC or a player, a possible player character, splat, you should feel compelled to want to play that at a certain point, and and that's what we hope people read and they think, oh, I'm going to play that one. I'm going to play that one. So, yep.
Yeah. As a writer, it's always obvious whenever I am really enjoying what I'm writing, as opposed to writing it because, I'm on a deadline and somebody's paying me to do it. Both of them are just, one of those is adequate, serviceable, just fine, and one of those is stellar, and I'll let you, decide which one. Uh, so Lauren, we haven't heard a ton from you. That's okay, but can you give us maybe some, not spoilers, because I don't want to necessarily, spoil these stories for folks, but let's talk about the reason that we are doing a fiction anthology and what it is we're trying to accomplish with going so soon into, let's talk about stories, but not in the sense of game stories, right? But instead in the sense of narratives about our world.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do there is show you the different kinds of games and stories you can tell in the world, because Curseborne is it's what is the meme, you can fit so many stories into this baby, right? Like
Yes.
the world is sort of so big and you can make it whatever you want. And that can be intimidating, right? You get all these different choices and all these different tones. But how do you fit that into what your people at your table want? How do you understand the world better just as a player or as a story guide? And so what we did was we made sure that we have stories from all of the different lineages, and I always have to do that switch, which one's lineage, which one's family, and making sure that we have different tones. So we have, we have straight up horror in there. We have sort of like creeping dread. We have a couple of heartbreaking love stories in there. And I think it's really one of those things where the writers did such a great job of showing the different, not just moods, but also genres you can play around in. You really can kind of make Curseborne into whatever you want it to be at your table. So we went Kim's on there, and Kim did a really cool story that's this. It's both it's a love story. It's there's some fantastic body horror in there. And like sort of a kind of, here's this weird thing and you get this sense that something's off. And I just think the way that everybody, like, there were a couple of people who definitely picked powers that they thought were cool and showcased that. Um, and there were others that sort of went for like, what does it mean to be a character? One of the stories is about someone who's one of the Hungries, the Gaki family, and how does what your family wants you to do conflict with what you want to do and what you need to accomplish, and how does that, how do you handle that sort of, this is who you are, you're stuck with it, what do you do? D, you're muted.
Sorry. I was typing earlier and I didn't want to come across while you were typing
Clickety
or while you were
clackety.
talking. Yeah, I have a clacky type keyboard because I like the noise. Yeah, I love I love reading a story set in a game world that makes me want to play the game. And doesn't just tell me like, oh, there's these really cool characters that have names and they're doing all the cool stuff, but instead, oh man, there's a mystery or a story or it's just situations that can happen that really make me want to kind of role play those kind of things. So it sounds like everybody's kind of taking that approach of like, what does it mean to be accursed? What does it mean to be a person in this world? What does this world feel like? And how do I display that to people so that they can think of how their characters might react in similar situations? So I really love that kind of thing.
Yeah, and they did a great job with dealing with the curse too, right? Like, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not always fun.
No.
And sometimes it really wrecks a whole lot of things in your life. And what do you do in that situation? So I think all the writers really kind of took that to heart and just help. I think that will help with people who are trying to figure out how to get into the game too. Like, how does
I,
my character deal with,
yeah.
with sorcerers, where you're sacrificing something, and that has to mean something. You can't just be like, I'm gonna go buy this thing from the dollar store and light it on fire, and now it's a sacrifice, so I get to do a thing. No, no, it
No.
has to cost you something for real. And
Right.
yeah, just like sort of demonstrating how that looks and how it affects you
Mhm.
on a personal level.
Yeah. I also, I think about that a little bit as almost like a unofficial story guide uh aid because,
Oh, absolutely.
when I think about running games, I think about like, well, what kind of story do my players want to run through? Clearly they're going to help me figure that out with their aspirations, but also like, how do I embody these themes? How do I embody these moods? How do I get character, how do I get the players to react in character and help them immerse themselves in the game? And when I read stories that are really atmospheric and kind of sell the concepts of the kinds of things that happen to people in these games, it really gives me, some good fuel for like, oh, okay, how does the curse kind of mess up people's lives? And the players don't need to think about that, but I can think about that, and I can think
Oh,
about how to, pull on these threads and make people make hard choices that, maybe neither option is great, does. So I think for a lot of people, I think, even if you're not a huge, urban fantasy, urban horror fan, reading these stories to get into the mood, to get into the mindset for Curseborne is going to be really helpful. And
and
they're
it and
probably
it
going to be,
and there's gonna be a range of those within
yep,
the horror, dark, urban
yep,
fantasy range that
exactly.
if you respond to one of those, you can go in that direction a little bit more when you play the game.
Yeah, exactly. So it having a range of options of the themes and the moods and the atmospheres that you can evoke and just having something to kind of help you see the range and what you can do with this game, I think, the more of that kind of stuff that we can do. And we've been trying to do that a little bit with, some of the advertising stuff that we were doing, some of the buildup that we've been doing, the actual plays, everything that we've been doing is trying to show people, this game feels familiar. Everybody's very familiar with, vampires and werewolves, and, we're all very familiar with the World of Darkness and how those games play. But we have worked very hard to craft Curseborne to be a game that is on its own a completely different animal than what people are used to. And so showing them how this game breaks away from the expectations, I think is every time we do that is going to help a little more for people to make the game their own and let go of their, expectations of what the game should be.
Or
So
what
we've
they've
talked,
played before,
or
and
what
now
they've
is a
played
chance to,
before. Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
play that thing you really like in a new way.
Yep.
I just like the fact that you can go off into some very different places with
Mhm.
this game. It doesn't have to just be wall to wall horror in that, because we take the whole sacrifice bit of the sorcerers that can spill into so many other people's lives in terms of what they might do. So, and all the different varieties of liminalities and outsides. I've got thousands and thousands of ideas of places I want to go, because that is just the perfect thing for what I like for telling stories, because suddenly I can make it this genre today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that so much. And it's really hard to write a game that is open enough for people to kind of do what they want with, but also has like some really solid themes. So, every time we can hone those things in and show off what it can do in whatever ways, whatever books we're writing is really great. So we've talked a lot about what is in the works right now, what all of these things contracted. We got authors on them, but we have kind of talked a little bit about some of the stuff that's going to be coming up that we haven't started on yet. And I know there's a lot of questions that have come up about, are we going to do this kind of book? Are we going to do this kind of book? Are we going to do this kind of book? And I don't have answers for all of those questions because I know people, they're hungry, hungry, hungry for everything all at once. And there's a lot of us, but there's only so much time that exists in the world, and there's only so
Yep.
much we can do at once. So,
And this is the start of a line.
this
It's
is, yeah,
we still have not gotten Curseborne's PDF to backers yet. So
yeah. So, I mean, yeah, we have, yeah, we haven't even gotten the core book out. We're already talking about what, five, like supplemental material books, and we're, looking forward into more supplemental material books. So, we are moving very quickly on this game, but we can only move so fast. So, please be patient with us on the things that will show up. And we have full intention to just keep making as many books as y'all are willing to buy because we have been working on this game. I know Rich and I talked about this, and everybody's kind of talked about this, that we've all been working on this game for, at this point,
many
years,
years.
many, many years. And now that it's moving forward, right? It was like this us pushing a boulder up a hill, and we got to the peak of the hill with the crowdfunder, and now it's starting to roll downhill. And as it's picking up speed as we roll downhill, we have so much to show you, to give you. We have all these ideas that we were building up over time that we just have to pace ourselves. Otherwise, we don't want to crash out at the bottom. So that's my mixed
Right.
metaphor.
And we are running the monthly tasty bits
Yep.
little bits of Curseborne to keep people
Yep.
having a steady stream of something, little things, little
Yep.
tasty or maybe very untasty bits.
Mhm.
And that is something that's going on. And
Yep.
also we have the newest thing that's up on the Curseborne website.
We do, yeah. So if you have, yeah, let's talk about that real quick. If you haven't found, I know we've kind of talked about there's something on the Curseborn website. There's a new thing. Go check it out. But if you haven't discovered it yet, I am just going to tell you what it is. We have an interactive story that is currently hosted on the Curseborn website. It's called Olivia Waits. Um, Maybe Dixie, who's running this, can put the web thingy and to the
The
chat so y'all
URL?
can the URL. That's thank you. I'm good at
I
this.
think web thingy works. We all know what you mean.
Yeah,
The
is
link,
it the
the
thing,
linky
Yeah.
poo.
the linky poo, the little thingy woo? Yeah. So this is an interactive novel, sort of. I mean, it's a story. I don't know if it's. I mean, it's probably enough words to be a novel, but I don't know if the reading time will feel like a novel unless you go through it a million times like I did. There is a lot to it. You're gonna poke around at it, and you're gonna probably maybe die horribly, and then have to do it again. That is intentional. You learn something every time you play through, and that helps you kind of solve the mystery of what's going on. The very basic idea is that your friend Olivia, Liv, is missing, and you're trying to figure out where she went. And so yeah, the that is it's super fun, and I was messing with it when it was still like kind of just the text, and now there's all sorts of bells and whistles attached to it. So go check that out when you get a chance. Not in the middle of this panel because I want to get to your questions and stuff like that, but maybe queue it up and then start playing with it when
Yeah, on Monday after the
yeah,
convention's over.
yeah, absolutely. Or, it on your other monitor while you're listening to this because I know how you work. All right.
Just ignore my 3
So,
monitors.
yeah, I only have two, but yeah, and three monitors. Yeah.
Our neurodivergent says
Yes, exactly. Got to be doing like three different things at once. So the other thing that we've been talking about is that we've talked about making a city book that will kind of show off a city in the world. So one of the things that we want to do with this book is we want to make sure that it's a real location in the world because sometimes you want to set a game in your home and you're not sure exactly how do I go about turning where I live into the world of Curseborne. And so we are going to take a real city in the world and convert it into a world of Curseborne. And then we are going to explain to you how we did that. So the first part of it will be here's the city, here's the surrounding area, here's who's in it, what's going on, what kind of stories, like what the political environment is, which
Right.
families are prominent, which lineages have control of which areas, what kind of liminalities are there,
Who works with who in what way? And,
yeah, what is the, what's the web of relationships? I'm sure there will be a
because
web of relationship.
we can say it that way, for
Yeah,
Curseborne.
yes. So, who's pulling whose threads and what does it look like? And then we will discuss, how we dug into the areas of the city and, why we think these things fit there and how you would make these connections between character groups and how to choose which lineages and which families, because we're probably not going to put all 30 million families into this one city. We may just put a couple of prominent families and then a couple of less prominent families that are active where they know the other families but they're not necessarily in the city. So the big thing is you're probably wondering, well, where are you doing this? And so we, after much deliberation and back and forth and pros and cons and everything else under the sun,
Which has been
we've
going on again for years.
which has
We've
been
been
going on for
debating
years.
what we should do for a city book.
Yes, absolutely. We have settled on the area surrounding Seattle and the in that Pacific Northwest kind of area. So our book will be uh oh, crap, I had the name of it and then I closed that out.
We'll just call it Seattle right now.
Yeah, it's a Seattle book. So it'll have a Seattle, the curses of the
City
Pacific
of the Curses.
city of cursed fish. I don't know. It will have a name. But yeah, so the city is Seattle.
But one of the reasons we did pick Seattle was because you could potentially have any of the families there. Whether we go into great detail about which that every single family, or one representative, but others have 7 or 12 or whatever. We'll do that as we develop the project. But if you are a player, you can it does. There's nothing stopping you from bringing your character to Seattle and playing it in Seattle, and that was really what we were
Exactly.
looking for.
Yes.
A lot of cities are great and very had a huge amount of atmosphere, but it didn't make a lot of sense for a particular kind of family to really be there. It wouldn't be good for them. So this is a really nice one for that kind of. Everybody gets to be involved if they want to be.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and there are plenty, I want to say quickly that there are plenty of cities in the world that it could make sense that any character could be in, but we wanted to find one that we had people who were familiar with, who could write with knowledge about the city, but also one that is not necessarily highlighted in a bunch of other games and, I don't want to say overdone, but like, oh, we have expectations or we have oh, well, this other game did it this way. Why aren't you talking about what this group did? And we wanted something that was a little less, I guess loaded or already done before. So Seattle kind of hit a lot of environmental, social strata,
On the
class.
coast with the forests over there, I think somebody
Yeah.
said there's a bog over there, like that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So
Yeah, it's a big enough city. There's a lot of suburbs. There's a lot of class dynamics. It has a lot of the stuff that we wanted to include, but it's also a city that, people are familiar with because they've heard of it. There's a lot of stuff about it. It's a well-known city, but it's also not so well known that everybody's, wondering why aren't you doing this one super niche thing that I've heard about in this TV show that I watch all the time, kind of thing. So,
Yeah, I guess everyone's got their own version of New York in their head, even if they've never been there. It's in
yes,
every movie, whereas Seattle is
yes,
not.
yeah, a little bit here, a little bit there. Yeah,
right, exactly.
familiar
Cool.
enough.
So, I think those are kind of the things we're working on. I know that people have questions, and there's a lot of questions that I see in the chat.
Yes.
So I want to go ahead and get to questions. If you have any more questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. I'm going to just kind of go through the questions in order of, asking and, you know, if, I'm just gonna, we'll see how it goes. There was a question, the very first question, which was about the location book and why it was Houston. It's not, it's Seattle. Houston would be a great city, but it's not the one we're doing right now. Maybe in the future. I don't
And
know.
it was in the running.
It was.
We were discussing Houston for a while.
Yeah. So the next question I have is there any chance of a historical setting for Curseborne? Actually want Rich to answer this because I have my answer. But I think Rich has a better way of talking about this. So I'm going to let Rich.
Okay. Is there any chance of a historical setting for Curseborne? Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Rich.
It was very succinct.
That was
Um,
so great.
But yeah,
I
I
can see
mean,
why you directed the question that way.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
No notes.
Any chance is a broad term. Are we thinking about historical settings for Curseborne? Yes, we are. I think it's rich enough. I think there's a lot of history that really, when we did the main book's not there to drown you in history and lore. We want you to get in there, feel comfortable with what's happening right now, as tonight. But just basically so you can start playing and delve into the thing. The richness of what's going on, even in doing some stuff in the past and things like that, we're going to explore. And this is, and obviously a historical book would be one way to do it. If everybody loves it really, really much, then maybe we'll do supplements for it. It's just one of those things.
Right. Um, Yep. I my personal answer to that is that I really would love to do a historical setting. And when I think about that, I think about like, okay, let me think of a time period that is really important in Curseborne history. So not just, oh, this is a cool time period that everybody, thinks about, like, oh, well, let's do this in the Victorian era, but actually really an important like political or
Cusp moment.
cusp moment in Curseborne's history, and highlight that. And maybe it's a time period that people aren't used to seeing in their media, but we will bring it to life. That's my goal. We don't have anything like set for that, but yeah, we definitely want to do historical settings.
Yeah, I have one in mind that is maybe not as historical as people are thinking when you talk Dark Ages or Victorian or things like that.
Is it the 80s? Because I want it to be the 80s.
It's a little more in that zone, but not 100%. Yeah, but
All right.
we will see. We will see if we get there, and I can
Yeah.
convince the team to do it.
Cool. All right. So, next question. Do you have any advice for leaning either on horror or urban fantasy in Curseborne? And I'm going to kind of ask this for everybody,
Mm.
especially our freelance writers. Chris, I know you probably have some great answers to that, so I'm going to start with you.
Okay. So
No
I
pressure.
think so. For me, I think the horror one feels like a kind of an easy fit. Like the way that everyone's cursed, the damnations and the torments, I, they just pull me into anything horror. So uh, creating characters and working for this and thinking of my own scenarios because I'm a perpetual story guide in these situations. The horror for me has got to come from the characters. So I would be looking at who are my characters, who are my players building, and what problems are they going to have? What are their connections likely to be? And then I like to create almost like mirrors of my characters or something that's an alternative path that person could have gone, so that they bounce off of them in that way. And I find you get tons and tons of horror out from just seeing how people react there. I love Curseborne for being that street level type of game because, yeah, for me, horror isn't, oh, the world's going to end. Not that that's not horrific, but it's kind of too big for something like this. But my friend, my family, something important to me is going to be lost, or I'm going to have to sacrifice or change who I am to do a story. That's horror. On the fantasy side of things, I really like the big range of antagonists that we get there. So I think if I was going for a kind of a fantasy approach, and you'll guess from this, I tend to lean more towards the horror side. But I'd be looking at a lot of the dread powers that we get because they're almost like an inspiration of, okay, well, what happens if someone pulls into this? I have a habit with games I run for my characters in drawing them into different worlds and dimensions, like this whole new environment that they need to explore and they need to solve a problem. And I think you can do a lot of fantasy that way with the liminalities, with epochs, with dread powers that it could suddenly mean I'm exploring this totally different place. That to me, I think you can get a good level of fantasy out of that because suddenly people need to work out the rules of that world. We all know how Seattle is going to work in our real world, but when we're in a strange version of that with imps and all manner of other types of creatures, well, suddenly we're dealing with things in a more fantastical realm. So that's how I guide. Either look at my characters or find something in the book, the liminalities, the dread powers, and bounce off that.
Yeah, I think I think that's such a great answer, but the liminalities is such a great way to kind of shift your games, you know, feel within a moment, right? Like you go from, the game's kind of like a fantasy thing, and then you hit a liminality, and it's like, oh my God, there's so much horror here, and then you go back out, or this is so much horror, and then you hit a liminality, and it's like, a musical episode on Star Trek. Uh, so, uh, Lauren,
Spoilers for my player characters for the next
sorry.
session.
Sorry.
Puppet. It's our puppet episode.
Yes. Lauren, do you have anything to add or say for
Yeah.
that?
I think a lot of the difference between urban fantasy and horror is tone. It's, you know, are you kind of leaning into the scare and sort of making people feel that like that sort of deep internal horror at whatever you're dealing with, whether it's the unknown or, you know, a big scary monster or, you know, your situation, where urban fantasy can almost have like a mystery element to it too. Like, you know that all these things in the world are real. That's a given, but what's causing this particular problem?
Mhm.
So I think it's a little bit of that shift of like what is your villain? Is it something that's scaring you? Is it something that's scaring other people? And how do your characters deal with that? I'm actually reading a really fantastic book right now that I think does and I was thinking about, I'm like, oh wait, um, it does a great job of kind of switching back and forth between horror and urban fantasy.
Okay.
So it's called Blood for the Sun. The author is Eric Nunnally. It's ERRICKNUNNALLY. I can drop it in the chat. Um, and his character is a shapeshifter who is he's been alive so long he's starting to develop some memory loss, and he's
Oh.
trying to solve these murders that are happening in it's set in Boston, and trying to figure out what's going on, but dealing with all these other types of supernatural creatures, and how they fit into it. But it's got both that sort of internal horror of like what is happening to me and how do I stop it, but also that sort of urban fantasy thing of like here's a weird thing going on in this setting I'm familiar with.
Mhm.
And so I think that you know, I love recommending that players and story guides kind of pull from things they enjoy
Yeah.
for inspiration, and that is one I would absolutely recommend to Curseborne readers or players.
Excellent. Cool. Thank you. Kim, do you have any advice?
So horror is such a broad genre, and it's like, and the line between urban fantasy and horror is really uh is just like one misstep, because with horror, especially when it's a vibe, something feels off, something's wrong, and it's just this just noticeable difference. It's that movement at the corner of your eye, that weird noise you can't explain. All of a sudden, that some random alert on your phone that it's like, what is this? Where did that game come from? I don't know, where it just appeared in my house one day. Where did it come from? And it's like, well, it could be like, and that could segue into something that's a horror. It's like, oh my gosh, now I have a Jumanji game in my house, so like Cthulhu is going to rip my soul out or something. Or it could be that fantastical, oh shoot, this is magical. There isn't any sort of, it's creepy, but it's not like that soul-sucking dread that something bad's going to happen. It's like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? And then you go on a grand adventure, and then when you get to the end of the game, everything goes back to normal.
Yeah.
But it's that because like the Jumanji picture book, those books were all like silent. So like reading it, it's like it's a fantasy. They're fantasy children's books, but like some of them kind of went like almost horrific. You know, oh my God, would you be stuck in Jumanji? You'd fall into a pit of spikes. It's like, oh no. So it's really you can switch back and forth, but I think if you for horror to be impactful, you have to have those moments of normal, those moments of calm, a breather. I like doing that in my short stories where it's like, okay, here is the normal, this is the normal pattern, and now we're sliding, and now we're sliding. Oh my God, what the hell is happening? And then it's just like you just hit people you hit people sideways with something. They're expecting one thing, you give them another, and then it gets more impactful for telling those sorts of stories. So it's like you're pulling at something within them to evoke reactions. So like my body horror squeakiness is different from someone else's. Like some people get creeped out with spiders, some people get creeped out with snakes, some people get creeped out with eyes. You know,
Yeah.
it's in weird places. So
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Rich, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think everyone is current. The idea that we aren't saying this is a horror game and we aren't saying this is a urban fantasy game, we aren't saying this is a dark fantasy game, is because when we sat down and discussed the tone, we discovered that my definition of horror is not the same as yours, is not the same
Mhm.
as Dixie's, is not the same as Matthew's. And so we were veering into that whole, not to diminish the value of the word, but into that spectrum of horror versus dark urban fantasy, and so we just decided we would just put that forward instead of
Mhm.
pretending we figured it out. So you get there, your definition is your definition of horror based on uh, old school horror? Is it based on the latest horror movies? Is it based on horror games?
Mhm.
Like what is that in there? And they will drift into the urban fantasy thing or the dark fantasy thing almost naturally. So you if your definition is that you really enjoy dark fantasy, you make your game heading in that direction. See what the players do to it, but
Mhm.
you go in that direction because there's going to be enough width inside of Curseborne for you to do that.
Yeah.
If
It,
your horror is more splatterpunk, that's a very different thing than
somebody
Danielle's horror,
else's.
or
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and I think that, if the question is how do we keep people on task, right? Then I think just setting up the environment and setting stakes, and setting the right stakes really, it helps your players know where to lean themselves and helps you know where the story is going to go. Because if the stakes, we talked about like low stakes street level, but if the stakes are, you know, losing your house, becoming homeless, losing all your money, things like that, that's very personal and street level, versus the stakes are, your entire neighborhood is going to, it become a liminality, right? These are two different kind of street level stakes, but they lean on different parts of, one's more kind of very personal and very, kind of maybe even real horrors to some people versus a little more fantastical. So I think, setting those things can help you lean into one or the other. We have a bunch of questions about new stuff that's upcoming, which this is the panel to ask those questions. I'm going to try to, we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to hit them with answers. A lot of the answers are going to be yes, just like Rich said. So let me get into them. Can we expect to see new lineages? Yes. If so, what themes would they be? We're not telling you yet. Sorry. I wish I could. We definitely have new lineages that we have talked about. We definitely are going to be introducing them. We don't have any new lineages being written at this moment, so they will come in future books. New families have been mentioned. How broad do you see the lineages, and is there a space for the content of new families for eventual fan content when the
community
Nexus stuff
content.
comes through? It's
Yep.
community content. Absolutely. Lineages are very broad. We introduced families that we thought were the most compelling for our brains to work with at the moment to give a really good, solid base to Curseborne. But there's so much space in every single lineage to explore the niche, to explore the more tropey, to explore aspects that we haven't touched on yet, to maybe take two families, rip them apart, and put them together. There will be so much space for that for community content. I think new families will be honestly a great fodder for community content once that's available. So I saw this question happen in a previous in last night yesterday's panel. I'm gonna try to answer it, but I don't know what the question really is getting at. So if I answer it poorly, maybe hit me up on the Discord and I could try to dig into it more. Will we see a free form magic as an official port from the Earthbane cycle for sorcerers? And is it more of an advancement in play or a mod of the system? So,
I think Matthew's been saying you can use this from
right. So we're
World Below
not we're not going to make any official World Below
port.
to Curseborne port. Will there be freeform magic for sorcerers eventually? There might be, absolutely. But that will be at a higher entanglement, so it will be like an advancement in play type of thing. But it will be its own unique thing when we get to it. And it won't probably just be for sorcerers. There will probably be ways that all of the lineages kind of create and utilize their own practices in a more freeform way.
Right. More
So,
blood magic-y stuff for the hungry things
hungry,
like that.
yep,
Yeah.
yes. Um, so there's a question about Toil and Trouble. Should we expect anything witch-like in Toil and Trouble? So I know that the game is named Toil and Trouble. We don't have any like very specific, these are witches and this is what witches do. I mean, sorcerers kind of fill that role a little bit, but if I'm thinking about witches in Curseborne, I'm thinking about mortals or non-accursed, not some people call them mortals and like Hungry and Dead call them that. But non-accursed who utilize magic. And there's a little slice of it in the sorcerer write-up where they kind of talk about hedge magic and people who can, anybody can do a ritual as long as they're willing to spill the blood for it or to, expend the curse dice and know what they're doing. So, are there things like that in Toil and Trouble? I'm not going to get too much into it, but Venators are not accursed, but they use magic. So
Hmm.
there will be some rules on how that works. Take that how you will.
Yeah, I think always remember that the accursed, which are our hungry and our primals and all that, those are they each of them have a very powerful curse that
Yes.
has accursed them, and access to curses is not necessarily tied to being accursed.
No.
We're
Yeah.
all in the world of curse where everybody has some curses on them because it's why you can't always tie your shoe without falling over.
Yeah.
It's some of it's real ditzy little things, and some of it is let your entire family is always, oh, why does our family always have this happen to us? And I mean, your Smiths, it's family,
Yeah.
rather than the big F families from the
Right.
curse. So.
So there's a question, should we expect higher entanglement in something like Player's Guide, or is the publishing model closer to Scion, so higher levels would be something like Demigod? Yeah, that the second part. It's not going to be Scion like in that this is a whole new play, like a whole new game. But it will be essentially when we get to it, which right now we're still fleshing out all of the level 1 to 4 stuff. But when we get to it, it will be a book of how to take your existing characters and move them into a higher
Entanglement.
entanglement and how to create characters at a higher entanglement if you want to start there. But it will be about, I don't think it'll be quite as big as the Curseborn core, because we won't need all of the base rules in it. But it will be it's going to be like when I say a higher tier of play, I don't mean like, oh, and all of the rules kind of change a little bit. It's instead more like, and now your game went from street level to maybe you care more about the entire politics between two cities and between families themselves, and you're dealing more with the interlineage politics, et cetera, rather than just, what's happening in your own little local group. And so that will bring higher entanglement, will bring kind of a higher, you're now more invested in curses, and therefore you're more entangled in the world, making the level of play just bigger in scope. So we will be doing a book like that. It is not in the works right now because we have so much other stuff to work on. Let's see. Does the dice bot for Storypath Ultra work for Curseborn? Yes, it does. There's a little thing that lets you put in how many curse dice you have whenever you do the roll,
Yep, I've
and
seen those people testing those, and
yep,
oop, and your curse dice is this many. Oh,
yep, and it'll even tell you if you got a wicked success or a cruel failure. So
hmm
all of
Yeah,
that's
my
in.
first roll was a cruel failure.
Yeah. No.
good stories from that.
Yeah, it is. All right. Question. As far as tone or genre, how much has romance been present in development? It's a bit dicey topic at a mixed table, but it does seem to be ever present in the publishing market, especially in the mix with urban fantasy. This one's hard because, in my opinion, romance, the term romance, is encapsulated with somebody ends up with somebody else in the end, like a couple, a throuple, a whatever. They end up together in the end. It Curseborne, in our horror genre, it has been more like if there is a romance subplot, it rarely ends well for anybody. So is it actually romance or is it just another form of horror? Yeah, there's going to be, talk of love interests and people trying to get together or people trying to maintain their relationships, trying to create new relationships, and the troubles that come from doing that when you are just fucking cursed. So, is it romance? I don't think it is, but are there romantic stories? Have they been, thought about in the development? I mean, there's so much
Hmm.
fodder for I love someone that does not love me back, or I love someone I can never be with, or I love someone who, wants to rip my face off. There's so much there. So, it's had been present probably, but it's not been on the forefront of our minds. And we're not trying to make an urban fantasy romantic. We're not making uh,
I think
the
it's a
Sookie.
I think it's a misunderstanding because we talk about relationships, and
Yeah.
when we talk about relationships, people automatically jump to romantic, and
Hmm.
I consider it like consequences of our actions,
Yeah.
especially when like the more you spend time with a curse, the more likely you are to pass that on intentionally or unintentionally. So it's like, well, if you get involved with somebody that's not cursed, what's going to happen to them? And I think that's kind of what we jumped on for the anthology and how messy that can really get, especially if you're someone that feeds on emotions, uh,
Hmm.
Hmm.
sort of thing.
I
It's
mean
like,
that
Yeah, I
what
think
if this
that's the
happens?
built-in part. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
I think
I
the presence
got
of families means that you can twist it in there if you want. It's the sort of thing that as a table, it can easily work. The fact that these families will have people that they're really close to, maybe in their family, maybe in another one, because the other occurs to the only people that really understand them and
Hmm.
aren't as much of a risk of being affected by their curse.
yeah. I
So
mean,
I can see how it can work.
human
Hmm.
relationships and romance are definitely plenty of room to explore in that. You can cross oceans of time to be with someone. You can take the loved one, the mortal loved one that you have, and turn them in. Give them the curse. Give them the curse that you have. And is that a good or a bad thing?
Right.
Now we're together forever, but what kind of forever do we have?
Right.
I'll try to anticipate the comment that Dixie made in the channel because it's a conversation Dixie and I have had. Is if you're looking at romance from like a publishing genre perspective, romance books have to, like Danielle said, end with the happily ever after. If you don't do
Hmm.
that, it's not romance.
Hmm.
Or
Um,
Preferably with
or
long
happy for
flowing
now.
hair
Yeah,
coming out.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're happy for now.
Mm.
And it can be a really hard thing to tell in Curseborne because something's probably going to come along and terrible things will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're running out of time. I know we're actually past time. So let me quickly just kind of get through the ones that I think we haven't kind of answered. Um, there's a question about community content expanding something Steam with narrative games. I'm not sure right now, that it's definitely something we could look into. And, will it be community content? I don't know. We might start trying to do some of those ourselves and see how they go and then expand it. We really want Curseborn to be multimedia in the sense that we want novels, we want stories, we want interactive fiction, we want games, and as we break into those areas of multimedia, we want our fans and our community to be able to follow in our footsteps. So eventually, maybe yes, but I like When, I don't know. Future, far future is unfortunately all I can say for that.
We're pro for it,
Yeah,
but we don't know what the steps are to get to that yet.
no,
But
no.
we definitely will be looking at it. We're looking at a lot of license questions
Yeah,
at the
absolutely.
current time. So
Yeah,
SPU and everything.
yeah, absolutely. Um, Rich, there's a question about uncertainty in the business sphere affecting
I'm
OPP
gonna
and
because
Curseborne.
we're running over. I'm gonna say check out the next panel, which is now only 25 minutes from now.
Yeah,
And that's the What's Up with Onyx Path panel, and I will definitely be addressing some of the flux that is
yeah.
occurring right now.
Yeah, cool. Everything else, I think, could we base a Curseborne on Sleep Token's album and lore? I, yeah, I mean, you could base a Curseborne on anything, honestly. Maybe not anything, but you could actually, you know what? I could do a challenge where I could base a Curseborne on anything. Um, so yeah, you probably could. And then no, the player's guide is not advancing the entanglement cap. Nothing right now is going to advance that. That will be its own specific book that does that. So that's all the questions that I've seen from coming in. We are super out of time. So I'm just going to really quick plug that the Scion Jumpstart is free on DriveThruRPG right now. So if you want to go nab it before it's not free anymore, which after today it will not be free anymore, so go ahead and grab it. Also, I think we are looking to crowdfund the player's guide later this year, so look forward to that. And if you have lingering questions about Curseborne or just want to chat Curseborne with me or anyone here, I'm certain we'll all hang out a little bit in the Curseborne chat in Discord. So from that, I hate to do like the quick goodbye, but everybody, thank you so much for attending and asking questions and paying attention and listening. I love you all.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye.